Hello and welcome to the Minority Arts Appreciation Society, where we're ticking all the boxes. Welcome to our end of year episode, where we're just gonna round the end of the year up with a few top 10 lists of our favorite movies and films and music. Movies and films are the same thing, and music of the year. And just talk about how we feel, our feelings, because we haven't been around for a while and we're sorry. This is just us trying to wrap it up. It's nice to talk about what the year was all about, essentially. Make while it's relevant. Josh, you ready? You excited?
Yeah, I've got my top 20 albums prepared. Looking forward to talking about those. And how many films do you have? Top 10?
I have top 10. Top 20. Top 20 I think is a bit
Well,
it's
albums are
getting too much.
on streaming services and only 40 minutes long.
Yeah, I feel like more good albums come out than good films. I don't know.
I feel like it's just more accessible.
Yeah.
Because they come out everywhere at the same time and not like in France for 6 months and then you don't get to see it.
I know. I'm gonna have a bit where I talk about how much I hate. That's probably my least favorite thing about films. I'm gonna actually talk about that because
Film distribution is just really weird.
It upsets me. It actually upsets me.
Honestly, I think it's one of the best things about the kind of dawn of streaming.
Yeah.
Hopefully, I honestly hope that it gets to a point where whenever a film comes out, it just goes to streaming.
Yeah.
Do the Irishman thing where it's in theaters for 3 weeks and then it's streaming. Because just to get it to everyone at the same time. Because I still haven't seen The Lighthouse, and every stupid, annoying Facebook film group that has Americans in it talk about The Lighthouse and what was the anti-capitalist Japanese film, Parasite.
Yeah,
and imagine
that's Korean, you racist.
I'm really sorry. I'm gonna edit me saying Japanese. The Korean film Parasite.
No, I literally have a bunch of films that I would have liked to have seen. I was going to talk about this after my top 10 list, but I might as well talk about this now.
Did you get to see Parasite or Lighthouse?
No, there was physically no way. There was physically no way, and I didn't want to do our top 10 list podcast in February, but there's so many films that I wanted to see that I just didn't have the opportunity to, just because the UK, which has a really booming film industry, just doesn't get films for ages. We're not getting we got last year we got Shoplifters, which also on the Palme d'Or. We got that in December, even maybe late November. We had ages to watch that. Whereas this year, Parasite, which won the Palme d'Or, is nowhere to be seen. That's not coming out till February. There's so many films. I think honestly, apart from Midsummer, which was my most anticipated film of the year, my most anticipated films of the year aren't out yet, and I haven't been able to see them. I'm really happy with my top 10 list, but things like Uncut Gems, made by the directors of one of my favorite films, Good Time, Parasite, Lighthouse, what the fuck, man? Why are they not here? It's so unfair.
I think what's really weird as well is making any list without talking about Parasite, either why or Lighthouse, either why they were or weren't on the list, is going to be really weird. It's going to be making
a statement.
It's going to be making a 1997 albums list without mentioning OK Computer. Unanimously, Lighthouse and Parasite seem like the biggest films that came out this year in terms of critical acclaim. So it's really frustrating to not have access.
Yeah, there's literally not one dissenting opinion. Not at all. It's literally on Ralph's top 10 of the decade. The Lighthouse, I mean. It's insane. And I totally agree with your point. Films really... I won't lie, film distribution needs to modernize like a motherfucker. I know there's been loads of issues with artists getting paid enough on streaming services like Spotify. But the thing is with that is artists getting paid enough has always been a huge issue in the music industry. it's not really a music streaming service exclusive issue. And it just makes like music listening and enjoyment so much more democratic, because just if you just have a few spare quid a month, you can listen to essentially anything you can imagine, apart from My Bloody Valentine on Spotify for some reason.
Oh, that's because someone lost the license.
Oh damn.
And that's just a crazy Irish band. Are they Irish? They're Irish, right?
They're Irish, yeah.
They're just a crazy Irish band. I think they're just a bunch of old folkies who can't be bothered to sort out the licensing issues.
Hey.
But yeah, no.
But that is probably right.
I think while yes, there are issues of like paying artists, it's also solved issues of gate guarding in these communities. Like, to get a film out, you have to have the connections or money to get it into some festival so it can be seen by people. With music, you don't need that anymore. You can just go and you can look at there's so many this year. Like, we had Tyler the Creator, JPEG Mafia, Weather Day putting out albums independently without a label, without some sort of big distribution backer, and get acknowledged for it. And you can't really do that with films.
Yeah, Ego was on the top of the charts. It was literally top of the album charts, and it was released independently. Like, you can see like it coming. Like, the other day I watched this film Caliber, right, on Netflix, and it was really clearly just someone like wanted. It was a really simple film. I didn't think it was like amazing or anything, but it was just a very like simple film that someone was clearly very passionate about making. And it's obvious that Netflix just went, we can put this on Netflix and it doesn't fucking hurt us. Let's just put it on Netflix. People can see it. Like, I'd be so pleased if my film, like if I made a film one day, and I know I did a good job of it, and it got put on Netflix, because it would just be like, oh, people can just like watch that whenever now, rather than just like putting it in a few cinemas and then it never ends up anywhere, and it never gets a DVD or physical release, and it's just lost forever. Like, how fucking miserable is that? That film is on Netflix forever because it's a Netflix original. That's been on my watch list for like years. I was just in the mood to watch it, so I did. And it's like, that's cool, because now he has that connection, he has that publicity. If the director, I mean, if he ever wants that film to be seen by people, or if anyone ever catches that and goes, I like that work, it has the better chance of happening. It's just so much better. And it's obviously going to work a lot more easily for someone like Martin Scorsese, who has like the right to be like, I want this on Netflix for a bit, but there's got to be in some cinemas. But I think it's really impressive that someone like Martin Scorsese is able to look at where film is obviously going, which I think is this combination of like streaming services and like a limited release in cinemas. Because look at, like, Roma did that last year,
and we saw it with Marriage Story as well.
Yeah,
I can see how like budgeting is an issue of like you can't just do stuff independently because it takes thousands and thousands of dollars to make a film. So I can see why it has to be mediated through some sort of company. But I wish distributing companies, it does feel like elitist, just like having it at a few festivals and then not. I don't know. I mean, I get it's expensive to distribute, but I think more collaboration with streaming services would be really beneficial.
Yeah, definitely.
And cheaper, surely.
Yeah, exactly. It's just a much more economical way of doing it. Like, it's a guaranteed income when you make those deals with streaming services, rather than the chance of a limited release. It might get a limited release and then someone catches it and it blows up, but that's 1 in a million. Whereas if you put it on a streaming service, you just have that. Like, I don't know. It's just so much better to me. It's so much better for everyone involved. I would just so much rather, if I was a director, if it was a choice between Netflix, like, and maybe like Netflix being like, we will just put your film, we'll give you a bit of a budget and we'll just put you on Netflix once you've made this film, and then like finding a distributor and like getting an awkward limited release, I'd instantly take that Netflix deal. I'd absolutely instantly take it because I just know people would see it. Like, look at fucking oh, I know it had Sandra Bullock and everything. But look at Bird Box. Like, look at Bird Box. That fucking went crazy. That went crazy, and it was just some random film on Netflix. Like, it does just happen.
Yeah, no, I agree. Like,
Mm.
I think Bird Box and The Irishman have definitely shown the potential of streaming and especially for like indie stuff. So hopefully we see that embraced more in the 2020s, before the world ends. So would you like to jump into your top 10
I
films of
would,
the year?
I would love to. I would
Also,
absolutely love
do
to.
you think you'd update your list in like 6 months when the films come out?
Yeah, so like what I do kind of forever anyway is I have lists on IMDb where for like films for the past 10 years cuz I am like going to do a probably top 10 worst of the decade and top 10 bet, maybe top 20. Top 20 and top 20 worst of the decade, quite a lot like Ralph did. Because I just think that's very fun. So what I have on IMDb is a uh, ranking list for every year of the decade. So I'll obviously keep doing that as I watch more films from 2019 because there's so much stuff from this year that I would have liked to have seen and would probably be in my top 10. Not to knock the stuff that is my top 10 because I love like every film in my top 10 right now, but like things like Waves, Uncut Gems, and things like that, like which I'm so ready for, but just I physically had no way of seeing. I really must move out of this horrible country before I get killed by fascists and stop seeing all these films. It's a nightmare. But anyway, I would really like to talk about my top tens right now. And just like jump in if you have seen or have anything to say about any of these. Because you probably you have, and you'll have things to say.
I'll definitely
Um,
be curious about like the style they're in or the background, especially for
yeah.
ones I haven't seen or heard of.
Cool. Okay. So I've never done a top 10 on like anything before. I've never actually read it out to someone. This is so exciting. Okay. So at number 10, so this is from worst to best. Obviously the bottom at number 10 is still obviously very good. So number 10 is Bait, which is a very strange film about a small fishing village centering around a man called Martin who lost his fishing boat. So he's currently just like catching fish on the shore using these sort of improvised nets. Um, the thing that makes this film so unique is it's shot on 16mm, so it looks like it's from about 70 years ago, but it's set in the modern day. It's very much a contemporary film because it's about like gentrification. But gentrification we don't really talk about much nowadays. I mean, because it's not city oriented, but it's about like gentrification of like small coastal towns in the UK, which sounds completely irrelevant and insanely boring. But actually, with things like Brexit going on, it's incredibly relevant because a lot of these places did vote Brexit. Again, it's that whole working class feeling of feeling like unheard and things like that. And not to just like scapegoat the working class, but that is just a sort of genuine factor for why a lot of these communities voted to leave the European Union. They just didn't feel heard and they wanted some way of voicing their opinion. So in this film, the main character has sold his house to this like wealthy middle class family who kind of like fetishize his like working class background of fishing, whereas he's like it's a way to live that's dying and he's kind of in conflict with like new fishing regulations and things like that. But I want to talk a bit more about like the kind of shooting of it. It's remarkable seeing like iPhones on something shot on 16mm. The dialogue is sounds so bizarre,
Yeah,
and
I was
yeah,
gonna
go on.
ask, like, why do you think they chose to shoot it in 16mm? Is it centered around older people? So you're trying to get the perspective Is that what they're going
It's
for? Or?
definitely to do with age. So it's just about what it does is it makes Martin, because a lot of the film is visually just contains Martin going about his day-to-day life, and it really alienates him from just life. Like, you see how different he is from what you're usually seeing day-to-day life. Like, his life is so unique to like even the usual working class experience, um that this kind of there's always this barrier between you and him, and that's the like the 60 millimeter film, because it is so dehumanizing. So you just really feel how like out of place he is in this world, but he's out of place in his own town. And obviously the film is perpetually shot in 16 millimeter, so it's not just him feeling alienated, but you also have like when it's kind of flipped onto the wealthy middle class people that have moved into his home, they seem very just foreign, and like threatening, and their dialogue is so jaunty and out of place with the town. Like, everyone else communicates so naturally when they have, whereas these people have such a even more artificial way of speaking that's really furthered by the like filming technique, because the way it's edited because of 60 millimeter is really strangely. So the whole film just feels so bizarre and cold and desolate. Like, you just feel like this place is a land lost in time, and you feel like Martin is a man lost in this place. Like, he just has no escape. You feel so bad for him, but you also can't really connect with him. It's
That
really sad.
sounds like a very bizarre, emotional watching experience.
Yeah, it puts you through a lot, and you're constantly just baffled, I would say, just at his existence and the life around him. And like, it's also just sad, like what he's reduced to. Like, nothing like particularly humiliating, it doesn't get melodramatic, but just the idea of like a fisherman without a fisher boat is just quite like sad, really. um and then given the context of like gentrification, it's just miserable, really. And like I said, it's like interesting to see another slant of like gentrification from tourism, and like the idea of like moving to a nice seaside town which previously has its own industries that aren't tourism. But yeah, that's about everything I have to say about Bait. I don't want to go on about it for too long, but I really like it. And if you want to watch something that's just like really strange, that isn't The Lighthouse and that isn't black and white and strange and The Lighthouse, then watch this. It's really good. It's I think it's on Curzon Home streaming. So you'll have to pay a few pounds, but like it's worth it. It's nice to support like independent English cinema. Because it only has like 800 votes on IMDb. But it's great. Okay, so moving on to the only documentary feature on my top 10 list, which is Last Breath. I think I told you about this in like February or maybe a bit later. Last Breath, it's on Netflix.
Yeah.
It's not a Netflix original.
Oh, it's the fish film.
Uh,
Fish is in
oh,
it, right?
there's like a diver.
Yeah, there we go.
So it's about obviously it's true. It's a documentary. It's about this man who is a what's it called? Oh, it's like compression diver. I can't remember the name for it right now, but it's this unique type of deep sea diving, where you essentially saturation, where you're essentially in these tanks on a boat for 30 days, and you're like still on the boat, but you can't leave these chambers essentially because of the way they execute these dives. You're like connected to a diving bell, by a lifeline. They call it an umbilical cord. Much like the ones when you're a baby. Which feeds you your oxygen and like warm water, so you stay warm while you're doing this. And the reason they're down there is basically like working on like oil drilling things deep underneath the sea. So these divers, they're on their first saturation dive of their 30-day time period, and they just like in the North Sea, which is above Scotland. And it's incredibly like hostile, awful sea. Like it's known to be one of the most treacherous seas, worst seas to dive in. And they're doing work on this oil sort of device on the seabed. When they finish their work on this device, the ship's computer, which keeps the ship in place, sort of like an anchor but completely digitized, fails. So the sea is just dragging the boat away, and obviously pulling the divers along with it. And as the drivers are being dragged along with this enormous boat, which is an absolutely terrifying thought, they must climb over the oil machine that they were just fixing. And this thing is really tall, like it's not just a small thing on the seabed. And while they're climbing up this thing, one of the divers has their umbilical cord caught on the thing, and eventually it snaps. And this is all caught on their body cameras they wear while they're doing their work. And there's a absolutely horrifying part where you literally hear the cord snapping before the diver's cord snaps, meaning that he's without oxygen, without light, and without warm water at the bottom of the Scottish Ocean during a massive storm, which is absolutely horrifying. And it's just about their mission to rescue him. What I like most about this documentary is you get a real sense of the emotion of the situation, but also how calm and collected everyone stayed on the top side when they were trying to fix it. They never feel like robots trying to like fix a problem, but they also don't just completely break down. And then as an audience member, that's really hard to deal with because you're actually seeing some really horrific things. As just his situation is so dire. Like there are points where you simply think he cannot not be dead. So that's really jarring. And I just, especially as someone who's a huge phobia, like absolutely crippling phobia of the deep sea, just seeing people respond so like pragmatically to such an awful situation, but also like never giving up on this man's life no matter what. It was an incredibly emotional watch for a documentary. Not that documentaries can't be emotional, but like just the plight of trying to save one man's life is an incredibly emotional thing to stage a documentary around. And like some of the footage that they had because of the body cameras on the diving suits is really shocking. And when they do recreate things, it's never to the film's detriment. Like I think a lot of recreations in documentaries can come across as really, they just break it. They break the immersion a lot of the time. But it worked really well, especially when you've been able to see like the emotions of the people involved and around the issue a lot. You're kind of constantly trapped in this scenario, and it's incredibly well paced and tense. Like this film can only be described as tense and emotional, really.
Has it got like 127 hours vibe? Like how much of it is centered on the person in the situation, or is it all kind of around the people trying to help that person?
It's very like it's not so much biopic or like anything like that. It's kind of the person that it centers around, the person that this thing is happening to, is quite depersonalized a lot. I would say it focuses on the people around the situation because essentially the film tries to keep some air of mystery around what's happened to this person. Probably largely because it's very hard to imagine what happened. I don't want to spoil it, but a lot of the film focuses around the people around the situation, like his wife, the other two divers that were with him at the time, especially one of the divers, who was sort of a father figure for the person who became trapped in the situation. Hearing his testimony was like really, really affecting, because you obviously feel, responsible for this person at the time. It's harrowing, like it's really harrowing. You never expect to have that much insight into something going that wrong, like these horror stories of jobs that like none of us can imagine doing. Like I can't imagine like you being like, oh, I'm a deep sea diver, and then on top of that, on top of like how outlandish this job is, just the fucking awfulness of this situation. Like, think there's a part of the film where just nothing goes right. Just absolutely nothing goes right. The ship's computer just does not work, and there are these torrential waves. Like, oh my god, the sea is just. I don't see why we're trying to fuck with the sea as a species. Like, the sea just runs it. The sea just runs the show, and we should just leave it, let it do its thing, let it vibe. We're vibing. The sea's vibing. Let's just leave it.
Yeah. I think there's a real sort of I've been playing lots of Bloodborne recently, and like in cosmic horror, there's a real sense in the mythos that the ocean is there to cover up like dark old secrets that should not be
Yeah.
dug out. Like
Yeah,
so
that's my worst nightmare. Like that
that Cthulhu is
scares me
just
to my
at the bottom of
bone.
the ocean. So I do think there's a real like cosmic, genuine horror attached to something so vast and unknowable, but
Yeah.
also that is the planet. Like the ocean, the planet is basically the ocean with some rocks on it.
Yeah,
Uh,
exactly. Exactly. It's like
yeah.
having space on our planet.
Mm,
It fully is. Like it is just like having a completely different, unimaginable world on our own planet. And I hate that. I hate that so much. That's not interesting to me. To me, that's don't fuck with that. Leave it. Goodbye. No, thank you. But I mean, we probably should still do stuff with it. But anyway, yeah. Excuse me. That's Last Breath. It's very good and very emotional. A lot more like emotionally involving than Bait. Which is interesting for a documentary. Next up, these are two films you'll definitely have heard of. The next two, it is Knives Out. So me and Josh don't have a great history with Ryan Johnson. Um, we're not the biggest fans of The Last Jedi. But out of the sequels, the Star Wars sequels, The Last Jedi is probably the one I respect the most. Because it was trying. And I think Ryan Johnson is a talented filmmaker. And Knives Out like reeks of that. Knives Out is a really just solid, fun film. That never takes itself too seriously. But also never feels like it's, which is interesting coming from someone who made The Last Jedi. It never feels like it's actively mocking the type of film that it is, and going so far as being self-aware as to kick the film that it is, kind of thing. So essentially, it's a murder mystery, but it's aware of how ridiculous a murder mystery is in the year 2019, without being like Deadpool, where it's like constantly referencing the fact that it is what it is. There's some like decent like contemporary humor about like SJWs and like alt right. Like there's a kid played by Stanley, like the kid Stanley in It 2017. And he's like there's a constant recurring joke about him just being like a neo-Nazi, like being an alt-right troll and like jerking off in the bathroom to like a dead deer. It's really funny. I
blimey.
think yeah, it's really fun. It's really funny.
Did you see like Looper and Brick?
I've seen Looper now. I have seen Looper.
Yeah, I was wondering how is this like a big stylistic shift for Ryan Johnson, or does this make sense in
Um
his filmography?
it's like he is stylistically, yeah. Like writing wise, which I'm pretty sure he wrote Looper as well. But writing wise, it's not that different. Because what Ryan Johnson I think does is take things like genre and like franchises, and he's just very aware of them existing in culture. Like that, like you probably know the scene in Looper where he's like, where Bruce Willis's character says, we can sit here and talk about time travel all day, and we'll just go around in circles, and no one's gonna care by the end of it. So he's a very like aware. He's aware that films exist not in a vacuum, basically, and Looper's and definitely a self-aware action film. I would say, like it's
Mm.
it's taking itself very seriously.
It sounds like he has a real fascination with genre fiction, and Like that's
Absolutely.
that, like they have in common.
Yeah, definitely. Like Knives Out. I would say probably the best thing about this film is its style. It's constantly showing that similar environments in really new and interesting ways. And recontextualizing certain objects and lines, which is really interesting because you get like really familiar with these worlds and these characters, and he takes the fact that these are archetypes and uses that to subvert your expectations, which is really fun because that's what makes this film above just winking at the audience that they're making a murder mystery in 2019. He's taking these archetypes and he's using it to make these really interesting, like, narrative conclusions. But they're not also the most like deep things in the world. The film is never saying it's this grandiose murder mystery, but it's very clever. Like it's on a base level, just very clever. And a really like nice Sunday afternoon watch. Like I can't wait to watch this film on a Sunday afternoon with my mum and her, like she would love this shit, man. Like it's so good, like it's so solid, but it's the kind of film you'd watch with your mum. You wouldn't go like, I want to die during it. And that's the highest recommendation I can give for this film.
Fantastic. I need to check it out. I'm really looking forward to seeing it at some point.
Oh, it's so good. It's actually so much fun. And it looks so good. It looks so good. Okay, next. This is number 7, by the way. Next is Marriage Story. Which I believe you've seen, Josh?
I did watch Marriage Story.
You did watch Marriage Story.
Yeah.
Damn, that was hesitant.
Yeah.
That was hesitant as fuck. Oh my god.
Yeah, I wasn't super impressed, but yeah.
Oh, that's okay.
Give your opinion.
So the thing that I really like about Marriage Story is I think it's pacing, I would say. You kind of get a really nice sense of time progressing through a breakup, which I think is really hard to achieve in a film. Because you know, I've never been through divorce. When you go through breakup, there's a huge emphasis on how you'll process this with time, and how your emotions will change with that. Whereas with this film, like the performances of the characters so perfectly evolve. I think in the way that you would expect in a breakup, it feels incredibly realistic. Not that film should just try to uh, play reality. But it is like a wonderfully sympathetic film for both characters as well. I think both central performances are really strong. I'd say probably Adam. I just like Adam Driver a lot. Like we both love Adam Driver. I think he's fucking amazing in this film. My favorite line is probably during during like the famous argument scene, which is like spawned a bunch of memes. When Scarlett Johansson's character says that she wasn't happy, and Adam Driver Charlie says like, "You were happy. You've just looked back and decided that you weren't," which I thought was a perfect encapsulation of like Scarlett Johansson's character kind of being very lost, and just not really having a true sense of self. Like she's just been drifting her whole life, and essentially uh, takes a moment in her life and just uses that to project throughout everything. So she gets married to Charlie and goes, okay, this is the part where I'm a serious actress, and then she divorces Charlie and goes, no, that was the bad time. Now I'm independent person. But also, I don't feel like the film treats that as like totally cartoonish and that she's like a ridiculously bad person. I feel like it's a very evenly weighted film. But yeah, go on. What are your thoughts on Marriage Story?
Yeah, I think I agree that like I really like that the film is evenly weighted, and I think that you can make a solid case for both characters being either in the wrong or in the right. I think it leans a bit more towards Scarlett's side. Like I feel like she overall is the focus of the film. And Driver's character is harder to justify. I think, in my opinion, Driver's performance is a lot better than Scarlett's in the film. So I feel like he does so much to make himself empathetic. But in the script, like the way it's written, I think just on the text, he definitely
I totally agree.
Definitely doesn't come off more favorably, especially with how little he cares about the affair, and like, uh, um, yeah, he
Oh,
just definitely like was the probably the worst one. But
I think
anyway,
that's the thing.
yeah,
Like as I thought more about the film, I
mm,
realized how much of a dick Charlie actually was. Like, I think if this was played by not because it's Adam Driver, just because Adam Driver's performance is so great as just
mm,
a human being. Um, you relate to him a lot more than you do Scarlett Johansson, which I think is actually a really big problem with the film because you're so
yeah.
right. Like, on paper, Charlie is a dick. Charlie is a dick. Like,
I think
but then his performance is so empathetic that you just can't help but see them on equal footing.
overall, honestly, I just think it was okay as a film. Like, and Noah's one of my favorite directors, so I was really disappointed that I didn't enjoy it more. I
Mm,
found a lot of it to be quite dull and dryly presented, and despite how great the leads are, a lot of the performances feel like really out of place. Like Scarlett's mother and sister, as well as the lawyer, felt like sitcom characters to me. They were weirdly two-dimensional and cartoony, and it just didn't make sense next to how grounded and fleshed out the leads were. Yeah, I've already said I think the leads' performances are honestly fantastic, and like Driver's monologue near the end, like, was really good, really good. But I think it is kind of wasted potential, and I don't think it will hold its own against other big indie breakup films like The Valentine or Before Midnight,
mm,
where I feel like the they really passionately write dysfunctional relationships in ways that I feel super invested in. In this, I just couldn't get to the emotional place of feeling like I really care that much. I honestly don't find either character that interesting. One of them is a pretentious director who is amazingly performed by Driver, but on paper, I just don't think he's that compelling of a character. He's just a narcissist. And then Scarjo is, she's been wronged for sure, but there's no part in the film where I genuinely feel like I care about her. And this is more of a thing of like, I don't think the film did enough to make either of them super compelling as people for me to feel like the emotional moments that aren't. Where something like Blue Valentine and Before Midnight, I feel like I really get a sense of who they are as people, and I think they're super interesting, fun, or at least exciting. And even
mm.
when the characters in those films are at their most abusive, we see real emotional abuse from both sides of the parties in Before
Yeah.
Midnight, and we see almost physical abuse, uh, death of physical abuse in Blue Valentine, and it's
Hmm.
challenging. It's challenging because they made me like the characters to an extent, and
Yeah.
they asked me to stay with them after that stuff happens. And this one, it was just like they just bicker for 2 hours, and it's. It felt really trivial to me. I don't know why it didn't hit me. Maybe I was in a bad mood on the day that I watched it, but it was like
For me,
okay,
it was
I
like
don't know.
working backwards. Like, it was like
Yeah.
seeing um how like in the seeing how through their bickering. You're right. They basically do only bicker. Um, but in the scenes when they're not bickering, and also in the moments of like intimacy in their bickering, and how their bickering reveals how much they know about each other. I think that's something Noah did incredibly well in his writing, was like giving this relationship backstory when you're only actually seeing the end of it, and getting a sense of that during these bickerings like feels really
Mm.
grounded, because like arguments are based on long standing issues, especially when you're going through a bloody divorce. So I just found that writing like so genius.
I guess I
um
just feel like this has been done better so many times. Like I think about a film like Paris, Texas, which literally does
mm,
everything happening in Paris, Texas is happening after this couple has stopped being together. And when you finally get in the last, I'm not going to spoil anything, but the last 30 minutes, when you finally get that retrospective, like what were they actually like when they were together? You never see it. It's all told through like monologue, but it's so much more powerful to me in presentation and there's just this energy behind it, and I didn't get that from this, and I don't understand why people are so impressed. I feel like we've seen this film a lot of times and better.
I understand that.
Like even a film like Her, you never see the actual marriage other than like little snippets, but you completely understand why they're falling apart. And that's a movie about divorce, which I don't know. Maybe I'm comparing this too much to my other favorite films that are about dissolving, well, troubled relationships, but it just doesn't come off as distinct or unique in a way that like justifies its existence for me outside of just being a, I don't know, fine. Yeah, I hate to be a party people on your top 10.
That's okay.
Yeah.
I wanted you to have your thoughts.
Yeah.
Well, that's about all I have to say. It's obviously on Netflix, like we talked about before. And moving on to number 6, which is In Fabric, which is a new film from Peter Strickland. It says 2018 on IMDb, but all the discussion around this has been from this year. It probably just played at like one film festival last year, and the world has decided it's a 2018 film. But whatever. In Fabric is the weirdest film on this list, I would say, even weirder than Bait. It is about a red dress that goes around killing people and becoming responsible for people's deaths. It's kind of an anti-capitalist satire at points, with a lot of discussion of consumerism, and how people become essentially like engaged in a cult as a result of consumerism without ever feeling like a dick talking down to people who like buying things. It never feels like the film is too stupid to up its own arse to laugh at itself. I think if a film was so up its own arse that it was able to laugh at other people while also being about a murderous red dress, then I would hate that film more than anything.
When you described the premise, the first thing I thought of was the Netflix film, the horror film where the paintings kill people.
Velvet Buzzsaw.
Yeah, Velvet. Is it
imagine if Velvet Buzzsaw was good.
Is that what this is?
This is good Velvet Buzzsaw, but with clothes instead of paint.
Okay.
It's really good. Like it's really fun. And it's like it's gorgeous as well. Like the red dress itself is so like it's described as artery red in the clothes catalog in the film. It's also an English film, by the way. It's extremely English. The contrast between like these gorgeous clothes and like the artifice of this like awful department store is just like really lovely. It's a perfect satirization of like how we take like gorgeous artistry by like fashion designers and any other like piece of art that people produce and then put them in these like horrible stores for like people to find and prices to be slashed and people to argue over. And also the like kills are just really compelling. Like there's this horrible scene of like the dress just like floating above someone. And just the shot of it so like vaguely looks like a person, but it's obviously not, and it moves kind of just like a person does. I never thought I'd be scared of a floating red dress in such a ridiculous film, but it actually did that. I'm not easily scared. I just really had a lot of fun with it. I kind of there's a lot of films this year that were able to laugh at themselves, but without completely like falling off the valley and just becoming a farce. There's some outright weird things that I don't understand that I won't spoil in this film. This is definitely a film to be watched multiple times. I've seen it 3 times now, which is more than I've seen a lot of the films on this list. But it's just that compelling and ridiculous and interesting. I really can't recommend it enough, honestly. I just haven't seen it. I probably haven't seen anything like this film ever in my life, and it's made me want to go through like Peter Strickland's filmography because he's a really big name, and he's just made a lot of really weird stuff that I can't wait to go and see now. But yeah, I can't recommend it enough. I think it's still playing in like some theaters from time to time. I think it's made like serious waves, and I think it might be on Amazon. But yeah, absolutely check it out if you get the chance. It's so fun. I'd really recommend this to you, Josh. Actually,
Sounds awesome.
it's really great.
Is
It's
there
really
anything like Under the Skin?
it's like it's
Oh no.
yeah. I would say like the executions of the some of the more like suspenseful scenes are quite like those scenes in Under the Skin where she's just in a dark room kind of thing. Like it's very like uh otherworldly at points.
Mm.
The film is fucking weird. The film is fucking bizarre. I keep watching it again and again just to try and understand it a little bit more. Which is really fun without feeling like a chore. Like it doesn't feel like the base experience of the film is enjoyable enough that when I go back and watch it to get more out of it, it's still entertaining. But yeah, that's In Fabric. So now we move into the top five, which is like the big boys for me. Like these are phenomenal. Like this is what cemented this as a great year for films because these were impressive. And really left a mark on me emotionally. Like genuinely changed the way I see films. Like all of these films changed the way I view filmmaking in its own way. Which is just really exciting. So the first film is The Souvenir. That's number five. Which is essentially about a young film student who falls in love with a heroin addict. But it's not a ridiculously melodramatic film. You never see him take heroin. You never really, for a long time in the film, you never really see the effects of his heroin taking, other than how it impacts their relationship. And it takes quite a long time for their relationship to occur in the film. It's incredibly subdued as well. You see a lot of the same environments a lot of the times, but like I said about Knives Out, the film's constantly showing you um, new ways of recontextualizing the house at different points in the film. It's just set in her sort of very studenty flat in the 80s, which I didn't realize for a lot of the film, but that's the reason it's set in that time is because it's semi-autobiographical. It's directed by Joanna Hogg. Um, it stars Tilda Swinton's daughter and Tilda Swinton as her mum, which is lovely at points. There's some really touching moments between the two of them. But I think what this film does best is showing like how addiction can be suppressed, essentially in a way. Like the male partner does a remarkable job of covering up his heroin addiction. Um, and like I said, the only really way you get a sense of how it's affecting him as a person is through how it's affecting their relationship. Because the female protagonist becomes so enraptured in this man for good reason. Like he comes to her at a very contentious moment in her life, being a film student trying to find her voice, um, and essentially gives her both a distraction and also a way to find some form of telling stories. And as the film degrades, and along with the male's mental state, becomes so painful, and you get a real sense of how this created the kind of person that the filmmaker is today, which I think is incredibly powerful, especially coming from so long ago in their life. But you get a real sense that the events that they depicted in this film are incredibly inherent to how the reasons that she makes films today and how she makes films today, which I think is a remarkable achievement, especially telling such a personal story. But I really think it just gave me a sense of how you find your voice, that not being the most natural thing in the world at times, and it taking something happening to you or a change in your life that you have to make for yourself that's not just, like a poetry coming from within, but something happening to you that forces you to make art in a new way, which I loved very much. And I love this film very much. It's beautiful. It's very slow as well. I think you'd really like this one, Josh.
Yeah, I was gonna say I haven't seen this film, but I've seen the poster on the internet a lot, and Man, it's wow. It's
It
an
looks
amazing
like
poster. I love the
yeah,
poster so much.
yeah. The posters. Is it the one where they're both like facing away from each other but sat next to each other?
Yeah, and it's their
Yeah,
reflection in
yeah,
what
yeah. It's
and so
gorgeous.
yeah, that's one of those posters just like, yep, I would love that film.
Yeah, you would
Love
really
it.
like this. You would
Vague
really,
pink
really
hue
like.
energy. I love it.
Vague what?
There's like a vague pink hue in the poster.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
I love the protagonist for this film. She's
looks really
so
good.
subdued, but she's really like soft and like
The
polite.
chin on the male protagonist as well. I mean,
He is a very interesting man. His
but his
performance.
chin's powerful. I mean, can we just
I know
focus on his chin for a sec?
he's like
Yeah,
that
his
chin
performance.
encapsulates so much about him. He's very like because it gives him a slightly off look, but also very like strong, and that's what he is. He's very like offbeat as a person, but he's very like subtly commanding. I really like watching him on screen. Like he's just really engaging at all points. Like you're constantly wondering how much he cares and how far he's willing to push this relationship. Um, and along with her as well. Oh, it's wonderful. It's really good. I'd happily watch this again with you.
It looks fantastic. I can't wait to see it.
It's on cousin streaming. So we could just split the rental one time.
Ooh.
So next up, is a film that I had lovely experience seeing. Which is Thunder Road. I saw this at the Prince Charles Cinema, the best cinema in London, after Beckhamplex. And afterwards there was a Q&A with the director Jim Cummings. Thunder Road is a film about a police officer who essentially has a mental breakdown following like a divorce, and then his mother dies prior to the film's events. The film opens on his mother's funeral, and he begins the film by dancing at his mother's funeral to Thunder Road playing out of a Hello Kitty boombox. Um, but it's also really sad, and the film absolutely perfectly juggles this tone of really sweet and sentimental, but also laughing at how ridiculous the central character is. And the arc that this person goes on in learning to be a good man and be a good father while losing his like job as a police officer is really powerful and sweet and touching. The film's really economical. It was made in 92 minutes. It was made for less than $100,000. But it gets absolutely everything it needs to get done. I remember at the Q&A, Jim Cummings, the director, who also stars in the film as the police officer, and produced the film and directed it and wrote it. He did everything essentially. He was like, "Fuck, why did I make this film Thunder Road?" It is, Bruce Springsteen is one of the most like copyrighted large artists of all time, but he showed that he managed to get the film shown to Bruce Springsteen. It was like, yeah, this is good. You can take that, which I think is just awesome. But I think it encapsulates that like Bruce Springsteen idea of America really well without being like America's the greatest country ever, because there's a lot of themes of like leaving who you were before and becoming a better person, and a lot of the time like the song Thunder Road is about leaving your hometown to better yourself economically, whereas this film is just about leaving who you were before and becoming a better person internally. The daughter in the film is a really great child actress. It's a really great divorce movie. Better divorce movie than Marriage Story, confirmed. Like the idea of the battling that him and his wife go through for his daughter's affection, which he is ultimately losing at the start of the film, is really tough to see and makes like the payoff at the end of the film all the more worth it. I love this film very much. This film really touched me. The ending is one of the sweetest, most gratifying things I've seen in cinema all year. Like it's it's gorgeous. I love this film very, very much. And Jim Cummings seems like a lovely, lovely guy. Like
I
really nice.
I've heard of the film before, and honestly, like I thought it was gonna have Kung Fury energy because um Kung Fury is a film that came out in 2015. It was directed by David Sandberg, written by David Sandberg, starring David Sandberg. So I just thought this would have the similar energy, you know, just some crazy guy made a film about like a crazy policeman who likes Springsteen. But it sounds more serious than Kung
No,
Fury,
yeah,
to my
yeah.
disappointment, maybe.
Yeah, it is the opposite of Kung Fury. It's
Oh,
kind of
okay.
mumblecore, but I love it.
Oh, I love
Um,
Mumblecore.
yeah, it's a bit mumblecore, and the trailer is so good. Like the trailer is fantastic. Like if you watch the trailer and you think that looks great, you're gonna love this film. Um, it's kind of been a good year for that. Like a lot of the films I've been expecting to see have been exactly what I expected. It's been very
Yeah.
nice. It's been a very
Before
simple film,
before you
simple
move on
year.
before you move on to the next your next entry on the topic of
Mm,
trailers, I just wanted to say the Joker film. I was really bemused by that film, if you may remember. I didn't,
yeah.
you know, but that trailer is still like really
You
fun
went
to
off on
watch.
that trailer.
That trailer's so good. I feel like that trailer's honestly a work of art, like in itself, independent of the film. Like, it's such
Yeah, I
a
think
good trailer.
sometimes they just pull it off, these trailer houses. They took all the best stuff from the film.
Mm.
Um, I think they showed us what it could have been. They definitely showed us what Joker could have been. Like, if that
Emotional
film.
beats that hit in the trailer were way harder than in the film.
Yeah,
Uh,
totally.
and
Totally.
it yeah, that's, oof. Anyway,
Joker was a really good
yeah,
framework. I think it just lacked that extra step that a smarter scriptwriter would have made.
it's just very bland and obvious. That was the main
Yeah.
issue with it for me. All right, all right, all right.
All right, all right, all right. Okay, I'm ready for this bitch.
All right, top three. This is the one.
Okay, so this is
Godzilla, right?
true. Yeah, so number 3, 2, and 1 is Godzilla King of the Monsters, Godzilla 2014, and Godzilla 98. The best Godzilla movies. Coming from you, the number 1 Godzilla fan, Mattie O'Neill. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Why are you waiting? I'm done. Okay,
Wow,
no,
really
for
subversive
real.
expectations there.
Yeah, I'm Ryan Johnson, this motherfucker. We can't do the Ryan Johnson meme anymore because he's actually really talented.
He was
Anyway.
always good.
No, yeah, he was always good, but he just made
Anyway.
an awful film. We need to never talk about The Last Jedi ever again.
Okay.
Okay, number 3. The Irishman. The least original opinion of the year. But actually, speaking of films being quite a lot of what I expected, I found this film really wasn't what I expected. And that's my favorite thing about it. I think it shows probably one of my favorite sides of Scorsese. Obviously, Goodfellas spends a lot of its time being very light-hearted. I do mean to talk about Goodfellas right now, by the way. Spend a lot of the time being very light-hearted and engaging and showing the fun side of being a gangster. But films like The Aviator, which take a really serious approach to things like mental health and the protagonists they're showing, and how flawed they are, is, I think, often Scorsese at his best. And that's what you get with The Irishman, but with the added flair of Joe Pesci, Robert De Niro, and Al Pacino in another gangster film. I think it would have been really easy to take these 3 characters, write a standard, romanticized gangster story, and push it onto Netflix. But this film's actually really bare. The first hour is really subdued. The world of mobsters that we see in this film is really boring. I would say that they're older, they're more mature. It's kind of like seeing like Paulie's character in Goodfellas, like his side of things and that side only, where they have to run things as a business. And what that does for the film is essentially talk about how human emotions get tangled up in doing crime and murder, but as a business, which is very different, I think, from the things that he's talking about in Goodfellas. Which is why I think the first act of this film is still really strong, because it establishes a very different world than we've seen before in crime films. I think, especially like to Casino and Goodfellas. Ultimately, like the last 20 minutes of this film is what sold it to me, though. Seeing Robert De Niro as his character Frank as an older man, and just being lost as a person, just having nothing to say about the world. I think there's a line really early on in the film where he just says, I just go along with whatever people say. And in the last 20 minutes of this, you get a real sense of him paying for that, like reaching old age, seeing that he has nothing to show for it, and trying to find anything like religion to repent, and just to find meaning, which I think is really, I think, like, is one of my biggest fears. Just this idea of looking around you and having no sense of real worth to look on, because he's lived to this huge age, and all he has to look back on is broken promises and murder. And I think almost like weirdly like reflective on Martin Scorsese's part, like him just looking back on his career and how he's shown all these things. Obviously, Goodfellas is not a film that actually romanticizes Goodfellas, but I think it's just incredibly like mature and gorgeous film. I think the murder scenes in this are so engaging and shocking as well in a way. They're incredibly shocking in Goodfellas, but with this kind of gangsterous delight. Whereas someone walks by Frank after he told him to burn down a factory that he really shouldn't have told him to burn down, and Frank just shoots him in the face, and it's so shocking in how blunt it is. But I think it's the fact that it's so blunt and Frank doesn't care, and the film continues as if it's nothing that really gives the film its tone. But yeah, I love this film very much. It has a really strong emotional core, despite the fact that it's about someone that's essentially emotionless.
Yeah, I was gonna say I really like the parallel you drew between it and The Aviator in terms of the tone that Scorsese is going for. Personally, I'm still a lot more infatuated with The Aviator than Irishman.
Oh, I love The Aviator.
Um,
Yeah, it's
but
better.
but I really do think like the second half of The Irishman especially captures some of the saddest, well, reaches that kind of Aviator Scorsese vibe. I think like the real difference between this and a film like Goodfellas is Goodfellas ends with a smirk. He comes out in the suburbs. He's complaining about his life being dull, and everything's fine. He kind of looks at the camera like, "Yeah, I got away with it." Like he doesn't care. There's no repentance,
Yeah,
and we get kind of a similar like. There's no repentance really at the end of this film. Like at least no concrete repentance. It's always between the lines if you want to read it as being there. But there's a somberness to it, which is very Aviator-esque. There's no smirk anymore. It's just tragic. I think the second half of this film, I agree with everything you said. I think the first half, I kind of wish it had more of the tone of the second half. I agree that there was like it's still really well directed, and I like how violence is presented. But sometimes it felt like watching GTA missions, like going through the Scorsese motions, and like Frank's got to do a trade union mission, and he's got to do a mobster mission. Now he's gonna blow up some stuff. That's the next mission. I don't know. I don't know. Maybe I'm burnt out on that gangster Scorsese vibe, so I was way more interested in the second half when it moved away from it a bit, like that formula of voiceover, flashy music, explaining how
yeah,
gangsters work. It's cool, but I think after seeing him do that 3 or 4 times, I'm kind of over it. But yeah, the
I
second
get that.
half I really adore, especially the last 20 minutes for sure.
Oh man, that last 20 minutes, and there's some fucking shocking stuff in that film.
Hmm.
That film really hit home. Yeah, I can't recommend it enough. It's one of the best films he's made in years. I like it a lot more than Wolf of Wall Street. No, that's a bad film. Anyway, moving on to number 2. I think it's making it really obvious what number 1 is at this point. Number 2 is Pain and Glory, which is a beautiful and the latest film from Pedro Almodovar. He's a Spanish director. This is another autobiographical film, but with Antonio Banderas, one of my favorite actors, playing Pedro. It's essentially about a director who is past their prime, they're aging, the physical pain of their body is essentially inhabiting them for making films, and they're living in the shadow of their former successes. So very much a sense of Almodovar right now. He's very famous for the films he made in the 2000s and such. This film is beautiful. I would definitely describe it as poetic. Essentially, the
would
way...
Would you say it's poetic cinema?
I would say it's poetry. It rhymes. There's it constantly flits back between showing him as an old man, becoming addicted to heroin, but in this really light-hearted way. It's really funny seeing Antonio Banderas becoming addicted to heroin with an actor who is essentially a stand-in for Antonio Banderas during that era, because in this film, the director and the actor have fallen out because of an artistic decision that the actor made in the last film they made together, which is exactly what happened with Antonio Banderas and Pedro Almodovar. And the way that he shows his youth in this film and how that has impacted him as a filmmaker throughout and in making this film is beautiful. I really like just seeing old men look back on their lives. I think there's something really sadly beautiful about it. Like just the idea of what have I made, what have I done, is beautiful, and people not really caring about that a lot of the time has the potential to be just fascinating, because they're looking into why don't I care, what can I do now that I don't care, and the answer to those questions are sometimes incredibly sad. There's a really good performance by Penelope Cruz as his mother in this film, as well. I really like her. She's really charming in this, and Antonio Banderas again is just a wonderful stand-in for Pedro Almodovar. There's such a nice ending moment that I can't spoil, but it made the film. It probably took the film from being towards the lower end of this list to being up here. It's such a short moment, but it completely revolutionizes the way you see the rest of the film. And I went and watched it again immediately afterwards because it changed the way I saw the film so much. So on that regard, I have to recommend it alone, just because you can get so much out of watching it on both times with both interpretations of the film. I love it very much. It's beautiful, and really got me into Almodovar's work.
Awesome.
Yeah. Do you have any questions about that one? Fine if you don't.
I'm a big fan of the film Spy Kids, and I'm just wondering. I don't know. So I feel like Banderas is just repeating the same role. Everything you just described was basically what he played in Spy Kids, right?
Banderas
is aging who can't do the job that made his life worthwhile, finding new meaning. I mean, that was the plot of Spy Kids.
Banderas is really retreading old ground in this.
Phoning it in.
Yeah, I would say that he's definitely standing on the shoulders of giants with this one. But you've got to look past that to really get into this film, you know?
So this is it. We're about to find out what the best film of the year-ish.
Definitively. Excuse me, ish?
And Parasite don't exist is.
I don't know, man. They've got a job. They've got a job.
All right, let's go. What's it? What
do you think it is? What do you think?
Endgame.
Yeah, there you go. Hey. Yeah, it's better. It's better than Irishman.
I see this as an absolute win.
Shut up.
Is Baby Yoda your favorite film of 2019?
Baby Yoda is my favorite film. Forget The Mandalorian. I love Baby Yoda. No. My favorite film of the year is Midsummer. I've been waiting to talk about this film for a very long time. And I feel like I've been waiting for this film my whole life.
Midsummer, let's go.
Josh knows that I like sick films. I don't want to sound like an edgelord, but I really like films that make me really uncomfortable, and really push me to keep watching. And like I said, I feel like Midsummer has been the film that I've been waiting for like my whole life. To take the pain and the misery and the horror of this film and twist it into something so heinously beautiful. So to take the horror and the misery and the pain of this film and twist it into something so heinously beautiful, is genuinely all that I'm looking for in cinema. It is perfect for me. I'd been fucking tossing this up in my mind recently. And this I can't describe the extent to which this film is made for me. And it's fucking up there. It was squaring it up with The Shape of Water for a couple of days. It's that amazing for me. The arc that the main character goes through, and Florence Pugh is one of my favorite actors now because of this film. Her performance is so enthralling in its anxiety. The depiction of post-traumatic stress disorder and anxiety in this film is wonderful. Like, I actually could not believe it anymore if I tried. And how that sets up the transition that she goes through. And for those people who have been saying that this is just a remake of, like, what's it called?
Wicker Man.
Yeah, what a surface level, childish interpretation of this film. I mean, not only are the narrative beats of this film hits ridiculously different, but the emotions and the story that it's trying to tell are so ridiculously different. I just hate that. I hate that culture of film is like other film bad. Like cult horror is a genre. And I think this film does something wonderfully new with that. I think it finds catharsis in cult horror. Like Ari Aster described this as like an empowering breakup film, and it absolutely is that. I think it takes a deep pain and beauty inside all of us and turns that into something ridiculous and outlandish, but relatable. Something that we all go through in some way, not in terms of allegory, but in terms of scale. They're just different scales. And it's beautiful because of that. The whole time you're watching these horrific events and this horrific tone, you're constantly with it, with this character who is consistently empowered and finds home and family and love in this new environment. It is perfect. It is one of the most beautiful films I've ever seen. The set design and the way the characters act around them perfectly sets up why you would fall for these people, but also why they're twisted and demonic, which I think are emotions that are in all of us. Horrible thoughts that come after traumatic events and breakups, personified and turned into something beautiful. I think Ari Aster is someone that perfectly understands the dark side of human nature, but also why that makes us human and why pain is something that we can learn and grow from. I think he's one of the most human filmmakers out there. It's why I love horror, because of how it relates to us as people, how it makes us feel as people. And I think this ultimately gets to the heart of that. I love this film. Like, talking about this right now fills me with utter joy. The poster alone perfectly sums up the film. She's wearing this like a beautiful like headdress and she's completely weeping, but there's beauty there. Like, it's beauty in its nature. It's so natural and organic, and it's something we all experience. I love that. It's truly a universal film. It's more than just torture porn. I just love this film so much.
Awesome. Yeah, I thought Midsummer was pretty cool. Pretty cool film. Uh, I don't know what to say. That was a really beautiful summary of what Midsummer was. Um,
Thank you.
God, yeah, I really like the moral at the beginning of the film. The moral, mural at the beginning
The
of the
mural.
film. Yep,
Yeah.
which like lays out the entire myth of the film.
Yeah,
I guess.
exactly.
That was quite cool.
It's like it feels a story like as old as time because of things like that.
Yeah.
Like it's just something that could happen in any time period. Is like that's just what I mean by universal. Like it's something that anyone can relate to.
Also, like one of the prettiest films this year for sure.
It is
Um,
objectively like gorgeous. I love Ari Aster's cinematographer's style. Like I think it's so slow, but also just ridiculously delicate in that slowness. I think one of my favorite shots in the film is when you see like a banner over the road and it's like upside down, and as they drive underneath it, it like turns the right way up. Oh my god, man. Oh, also the way it depicts like characters on drugs is really, really great. Um, it's so unsettling and it makes characters feel really like vulnerable.
mm,
Um, and it takes like social obligation, and turns it into something really horrifying because you never feel like you can say no, but in saying yes, you're making yourself so yeah vulnerable and open, which is just horrifying. I think it's that idea of like losing agency over your actions, and that's ultimately what this film is about. It's about providing agency to the people who have never had it, who have never been able to find their footing and be given what they deserve, and taking the power away from those who don't deserve it to a ridiculous degree. Um, but it's obviously what films are about, heightening things, heightening emotions, to a ridiculous extent, which is what this film does the best.
yeah, I think watching it as a heightened breakup film is really the most exciting way to watch it.
Absolutely, I totally agree. And then I think also as well, it does also work really well as like a really solid cult horror film. Aside from that, but I think yeah, also like the film is hugely elevated by the emotional pathos of it. But like, I think if you're just someone who's really into like maybe the middle section probably get a bit dry for you, but like the tension of the film is fucking oh my god, like you're constantly at fear for all of these characters, and they're all quite engaging. Like I all thought they had their thing. The boyfriend is suitably a dick. Um, oh, and that's another thing I really want to touch on is I think the way this film shows emotional abuse is fucking spot on, like ridiculously spot on. Just wow, like the way he gaslights her. Oh my god, like it's so grounded. Um, it really did feel like I was watching real life.
Yeah, I was talking about this with someone who about the new Black Christmas film, and if you haven't seen Black Christmas 2019, basically it uses so it's about like the patriarchy, and it's a very like woke film.
Hmm.
Uh,
What's the premise?
I use I use woke in quotation marks.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
it,
yeah.
it
Disney
it's been
woke.
described as like the get out of feminism, and I personally don't like the metaphor they use for sexism, where they basically depict toxic masculinity as like a black ooze that infects people. So there'll be like a character who was really nice at the beginning, and then the ooze gets on him, and then he's a toxic man. And it's just a bit like oversimplifying of the issue and kind of like letting people off the hook for the issue, in my opinion. A film like Midsummer, which shows abuse as mundane and freakishly normal, is such a better way of portraying kind of issues of misogyny in real world scenarios
Yeah, like
because
how many times have you seen like a girlfriend be gradually worn down into doing exactly what their boyfriend was by a pattern of abuse? Like that's exactly, it's so mundane and everyday.
yeah, and exploring it in that way, in my opinion, is more politically constructive in terms of actually dealing with what it is in real life. It's not this super villain twirling mustache. It's just normal guys. and that's what's horrifying. And I think Midsummer does a great job at portraying a guy who he's just a regular guy, and the way he abuses her is very subtle.
Yeah, exactly.
It's clear, but it's subtle, and it's the subtlety of it that we need to be aware of in our everyday lives. Because when it happens, it's going to be subtle. It's not going to be black ooze dripping into someone's ear or something. It's going to be someone mildly gaslighting someone slowly over time.
That's such a perfect way of putting it. Yeah. Yeah. I just think it's such a beautiful film that gets so many things right. There's not a single thing that it tries to do that I don't think it executes ridiculously well. And all of the things that it tries to do are things that massively cater to what I'm looking for in films, and that's why I love it so much.
Awesome.
I don't want to talk about my top 10 too much longer, but like, yeah, this is a very important film for me. And I think everyone should see it because I think everyone can get something out of it if you just open your heart to what it's about.
Fantastic. So that was Mattie's top 10 films of 2019. Before we move on, can I just mention two films? They're not my favorite films of the year, but there's just two films
Shout
I thought were
outs.
really great that you didn't talk about. So
Hmm.
the first film is a film called Full Force. It's a documentary released on YouTube by the YouTuber iDubbbz. This was incredible. I was hesitant to watch it due to my own personal biases against iDubbbz politically. I think he's been really shit-headed and insensitive in the past.
It's that whole like H3H3 like contrarian type.
Yeah, he's a lot smarter than H3,
Yeah,
but I still
definitely.
disagree with him fundamentally. But yeah, this was a fantastic debut documentary. Um, it's kind of in the vein of Nathan Fielder or Louis Theroux, where iDubbbz kind of heads to Michigan and provides an excellent expedition into the lives of strange, eccentric, colorful backwater outliers of American culture. Its climax is immensely satisfying, and it even features a one-eyed cat in a pink dress, which I found very entertaining. I think one of my favorite things about the film is I iDubbbz like does comedy with empathy, which is really weird to see from him, where it never feels like so the focus of the film is like a Star Wars fanatic who makes YouTube videos and he's very overweight, he lives with his mother, and he looks like a punchline that you'd get in like a history kind of video. But
Hmm.
iDubbbz always treats him with respect, I feel. And there are like jokes. The humor from never feels like it's at the expense of the subject of the film, which is this strange guy that iDubbbz is investigating the life of.
Yeah,
And it always feels like it felt very empathetic and it didn't feel pitiful. It didn't feel like, oh, this poor man, he's so overweight, we feel so bad for him, or he's so weird and into Star Wars. Like it's always like it always feels like celebratory of this guy's strangeness and eccentricity. And it never
that's
feels like
really beautiful.
we're laughing at him, but more like we're reveling in the fact that people like this exist. It's on YouTube. It was released on YouTube, but hey, it's a film.
Hell
so,
yeah.
so I'm gonna. That's
He
yeah. The
seems
other
like a
film.
respectable person.
Mm,
iDubbbz.
that film was honestly fantastic and my favorite documentary of the year. So,
Nice one.
and the other film I wanted to mention was The Last Black Man in San Francisco, which is a amazing film about gentrification. Gentrification in the city, unlike the film you mentioned, which was more not in the city. And it stars Jimmy Fails, whose arms are amazing in this, by the way. There are many scenes of him working. His arms look very nice. It's really gloriously lush in presentation, and it's really original in how it approaches gentrification. And the film has a real slow intimacy, which may be boring to some, but to me it was just profoundly cozy. It's a great autumn film. It's somehow both tranquil and disquiet, and it's really fantastic. It's not mind blowing, I don't think, but It's extremely well done film and probably some of the best cinematography of skateboarding I've ever seen. Like the skateboarding in this film looks like Blade Runner 2049 in just like how epic they frame it, while keeping it kind of down to earth. So that was fantastic. I just wanted to mention those two films before we moved on.
I know it blew a lot of people away. How did you get to see it? Because it wasn't showing anywhere near me.
It was showing in a local like indie, not indie, but like one of those cinemas that
Art house
shows.
cinemas.
Oh yeah, art house cinema. My local art house cinema in Newcastle.
Awesome.
I was the last black man in that theater room, so there we go.
That's the North.
And that's the end of part one. Stick around for 2 weeks, so we'll be putting out part two, in which Josh talks about his top 20 albums of the year, and Mattie talks about her top 10 albums of the year. See you later.